In this videotape, we're going to show the 33 skills that make up the wheelchair skills test.
So first thing I'd like you to do
with a therapist in the chair simulating paraplegia or two-hand propulsion, and another therapist simulating the caregiver's actions. The first of the 33 skills is rolling forward on a smooth, level surface. The caregiver has to lean forward a little bit here because there are no push handles on this chair. Notice the smooth deceleration at the end.
For this skill, we'd like you to back her up against the wall there.
The second skill is moving backwards on a smooth, level surface. Good communication. Notice that the caregiver is doing frequent shoulder checks to make sure that it doesn't trip over anything. It comes to a smooth stop with the chair against the wall, stepping to the side at the last moment. The third skill involves stopping on command, moving forward and backward.
Just push her along, and when I ask you to stop her as safely and quickly as you can. Okay, whenever you're ready. Are you ready? Ready.
Good communication. A little bit of an abrupt start.
And stop.
And it comes to a nice smooth stop, not too abrupt, or the person in the chair might fall forward
Please do it as safely and quickly as you can.
onto the knees.
Whenever you're ready. Ready.
Moving backwards. Good shoulder checks as before.
And stop.
A little bit abrupt on the stop, but overall very good. Turning in place is a useful skill in tight spaces. It's done over a cross on the floor, and we're looking for about the same amount of movement of the left wheel forward as the right wheel back, and if that's the case, then the chair ends up squared up over the cross.
So, can you
moving
just
turns
move her chair around these pylons without touching any of them?
Forward, we start with pylons that are 2 meters apart, which is fairly straightforward for a chair like this. Then 1.5 meters apart, and then finally 1 meter apart. The key trick here is that the axle shouldn't. The axle should be opposite the pylon before the turn is initiated to avoid hitting the obstacle.
Can you just move her chair around these cones backwards without hitting any of them?
The same thing is done moving backwards. Again, the shoulder checks are important. In addition to making sure that the rear wheels are clear of the obstacles, in a tight space, then the casters or the feet may strike a wall or some other obstacle, so that the caregiver needs to be attentive to that as well in tight spaces.
Good.
Maneuvering sideways is the sort of skill that's necessary, for instance, getting close to a table or to reposition yourself in an elevator or a washroom. Again, taking as few steps as possible, front to back, and not using any more forward back space than necessary. It's very similar to parallel parking. You do a turn to one side, followed by a turn to the other side, moving backwards and forwards, respectively.
Can you pick up these objects?
Picking up objects on the floor, we have 3 of them: a coin, a pen, and a cell phone. They can be picked up in any order. The caregiver uses good body ergonomics, not twisting the back any more than necessary, and using one hand on the wheelchair for balance and support. Relieving the weight from the buttocks about every 20 minutes for at least 15 seconds is advisable to avoid pressure ulcers, and the caregiver wouldn't be expected to lift the wheelchair user, but to oversee the technique is being done reasonably well. In this case, leaning to the side is an excellent technique. And the caregiver is spotting on the side that the person is leaning toward in the event that there was any type of a fall from the chair or a tip, and checking that the adequate pressure relief has occurred. Leaning forward is also a good technique. Transferring from the wheelchair to another surface, such as a car or a toilet or a more comfortable chair, will often take place many times a day.
Can you come a little bit closer?
It would be unreasonable to expect the caregiver to perform this skill alone, so the caregiver's role is more in the form of supervision. Notice that the casters, the front wheels, are being repositioned so that they're in more forward. In this case, they're a bit to the side. Removing any barriers in the way, such as the clothing guard, moving forward on the seat, getting the feet off the footrest and onto the floor. One hand remains on the chair, and one hand over on the surface you're transferring towards, and then repositioning the feet. If there's a sliding board, it would be expected that that would be moved out of the way before moving back. Again, the head goes down as the hips go back. Head in one direction, hips in the other direction, and then again supervising to make sure that all the parts of the chair are back in position. While the person is out of the chair, in a wheelchair skills test, we demonstrate how the chair can be broken down to make it lighter and smaller for transportation or storage. The cushion was removed, paying attention to which was the front, which is the back. The clothing guards were removed. The rear wheels may come off in many chairs, so-called quick release axles. There's a small button at the center of the wheel that if you push on that allows the wheel to be removed. With a rigid frame chair like this, it's not possible to fold side to side, but it is possible to fold the backrest down by pulling on often a small string that releases a latch. Now we're seeing the chair being put back together. To get the wheel on, again, push the button on the center of the wheel to allow the axle to get seated into the housing, and to pull on the wheel slightly to check that it's properly seated. If the wheel won't come off in the first place, then it's often the fact that the brake hasn't been removed, the clothing guard put back in position, and the cushion back in position. The next skill is getting through a hinged door. First, the door that opens toward the person. The key issue here is to get the wheelchair out of the way of the door so that it's possible to open it without striking the person. Keep the hands in the lap so the elbows aren't being scraped on the side of the door. Pass through the door and close it behind you. That could be done in the backward direction as well. Coming back through a door that opens away, which is a little easier, but again, watch for the elbows. Open the door, pass through it, and close it behind you. Rolling a longer distance, this is 50 meters instead of the 10 meters in skill number 1. It can be done in a hallway or outdoors, but for the purposes of this videotape, we're doing it with 5 laps within the mobility center to help direct the path of the chair. We've placed the second pylon near the starting line, and we can help the caregiver by counting. So that was 2 lengths of the 5. Notice the caregiver is being careful not to allow the feet or any part of the wheelchair user to contact the wall or any other obstacles. That's 4 lengths, and this is the 5th and final.
When you get past that cone, you can stop. Okay. Good.
Moving up inclines that are commonly found in the environment. This is 5 degrees, which is the standard code. 1 degree rise, 1 inch rise in 12. The caregiver needs to lean forward. The absence of push handles means that she has to lean forward a little bit farther than would otherwise be the case. Coming down in the incline and stopping part way.
Okay.
The caregiver communicates well.
And you can continue on.
Doesn't want to stop too quickly, or the person in the chair might pitch forward onto their lap. The same going up and down inclines is done on a steeper incline, in this case 10 degrees. Caregiver has to lean farther forward to get enough force.
Can you take her down the ramp, but part way down, stop, and then turn to the side?
Okay.
This could be done in the backward direction instead of forward if the person was tending to fall out of the chair, or it can be done in the wheelie position, preferably if there's
Continue on.
push handles. Stopping and turning sideways is a good way to allow the caregiver some rest without having to put the brakes on. Side slopes are commonly encountered when crossing sidewalks or driveways. The front wheels will tend to want to deviate downhill so that the caregiver has to push harder on with the downhill hand than she does on the uphill one. This can be done in the forward or backward direction. For the test purposes, the downhill wheel shouldn't stray downhill more than 10 centimeters from the starting level. The soft surfaces are frequently encountered in indoor and outdoor environments with carpets or grass or snow, mud. It's somewhat difficult just to push the chair forward because the push high on the chair tends to cause the front wheels to dig into the soft surface. So that would be a little easier coming backwards or in the wheelie position.
Are you ready?
Yep.
But that was an acceptable technique that was demonstrated. Getting over an obstacle, the casters or front wheels are lifted off the ground by tilting the chair backwards. Good communication before doing so. It's more difficult without tipping levers or anti-tippers for the caregiver to use, and without push handles, but grabbing onto the uprights that support the backrest can be used to get into that wheelie position.
Please get her up this small curb.
Similarly, getting the chair up a low curb involves getting close to but not right against the curb, tilting the chair to get the casters up, leaning forward to get the rear wheels up.
Nice.
And coming down a low curb, this can be done in the forward or backward direction.
The chair down the small curb.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yep.
In this case, the caregiver chooses to do it in the backward direction,
And backward.
using the body positioning to achieve the skill. The same set of skills are used for the high curb. If there were anti-tippers, they would need to be moved out of the way for this skill. Again, try not to hit the feet on the curb when getting close to it. Tilt far enough to get the casters on. The person in the chair leans forward and notice that the rear wheels rolled up the curb rather than being lifted.
Are you able to get her down this curb?
Yep.
How would you do it?
We turn and go backwards.
Okay, let's do that.
Are you ready?
Ready.
So in coming down, one technique is to do it in the backward direction,
Can I get you to
as shown here. Notice that the caregiver is using the rigidizer bar on the backrest to get a better grip on the chair because of the lack of push handles. Again, using the body lean to help.
Are you able to help her get from her chair to the ground?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
So
Ready.
the person may,
chairs and
using a wheelchair, may want to get on the ground to do something like decorate a tree or do some gardening, or to play with children.
Okay.
So it's unreasonable to expect the caregiver to single-handedly get someone to the ground, so that coaching the person through it, moving the buttocks forward on the seat, removing anything that might be in the way, just as for the level transfer done earlier, reaching down. They notice the caregiver's position to sort of spot the person and maybe help resist the rate at which the buttocks get down to the ground.
Yep.
When getting back into the chair, which may need to occur after someone has fallen from the chair or have gotten down on purpose, notice that repositioning the casters or front wheels forward to improve stability, getting the knees close to the chest, putting a hand on the wheelchair, a hand on the ground, and head down when the buttocks go up, assisted if necessary by the caregiver. There are other techniques for getting back into the chair, but this is just a demonstration of one of those common techniques.
Good.
The stationary
able to get her in a
wheelie can
wheelie
be
over there?
a good position
Okay,
to
let's
relieve weight on the buttocks, although it doesn't do so completely unless you tilt it back quite far. But it's
That's great.
also useful for some other skills, and that's why it's demonstrated here. Turning in place in the wheelie position is much like
For this
doing it with
skill,
all
can you
four
please
wheels
get
on the
a
ground.
wheelie and turn the chair around to face the other direction, and then you'll come back and do the same in the other direction. You can stop in between if you'd like to.
Okay.
Okay, so wheelie and then 180 turn.
Doing this in the wheelie position allows it to be done in a tighter space because the footprint of the wheels on the floor can be smaller than it would be with all four wheels on the ground. Just as before, if the left wheel doesn't move to the same extent as the right wheel, then there will be a displacement to one side or the other. Once in the wheelie position, rolling forward and backward.
Just wheel the chair forwards over the screen line.
Okay. You ready?
Ready.
Okay, can you lean back for me?
Okay.
Will be useful when approaching the curb or incline edge, as we'll show in a
Okay, and can you go backwards in a
minute.
to where you started?
It's reasonable to bring the chair back down to the level between these two skills. This backward direction would have been useful getting over the soft surface to keep the casters from digging into the soft surface. This skill was not attempted because the lack of push handles would make it difficult to do it safely. And the same is the case for coming down a steep incline in the wheelie position because of the absence of the push handles.
Are you able to assist her getting up the stairs?
I can if you help me as well. So
Sure, you just have to tell me what.
So there are a variety of ways in which a person in a wheelchair and their chair can get from the bottom to the top of a set of stairs.
Once I tip her back, it's to,
We generally recommend, although it can be done with one caregiver, two caregivers, or three caregivers, we generally recommend three, and that's what's being shown here.
Okay.
Okay.
Only one person needs to know what to do.
1, 2, 3, and on go, we're all moved together.
The caregiver or the person in the chair can do the coaching. In this case, since we're focusing on the caregiver's role, the caregiver will be providing the coaching.
Okay. And 1, 2, 3, go.
We're just showing the two-person ascent with the help of the person in the chair. A third one could have been used with one person on each side with a hand, the inside hand
to help her get down the stairs?
on the frame and the outside hand on the wheel.
So it'll be just the same as when we came up the stairs. I'll get you to push against the front here to keep it in contact. I'm going to tip back and she's going to control
It's important when going up or down the stairs not to be tipped back too far, otherwise the rear wheels will tend to move away from the vertical portion of the stairs. Again, here the person in the chair can help.
1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2,
It's a little
go.
more tilted back than we prefer, but it's working reasonably well. And you can see it wasn't particularly difficult for two caregivers to accomplish that skill.